Another episode of Red versus Blue, episode 18. And my name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
We're into that area in the campaign that you call the air war, right?
We are. The primaries really don't count for much anymore. They're still tallying them up, but both candidates have achieved their required number of delegates. So now we're going to the stage between now and the conventions where one side or the other is going to use their resources to define their opponent. Now, this is a long-tested strategy. Incumbents have always used it to basically beat the hell out of somebody before they get a chance to communicate to voters and tell who they are and make them start from a position of very much disadvantaged. The most notable example is how Obama did it to Romney, but Nixon did it to McGovern. We saw George Bush do it to John Kerry. When it's done well, that's what happens. The guy is so beat up that when the fall election starts and people are paying attention in October, nobody cares. So that's what they're going to try and do. And the wise men of politics, and they're bipartisan. So people like James Carville, who worked for Bill Clinton, Karl Rove, who worked for George Bush. You look at David Axelrod, who worked for Obama. They are all saying, okay, fellas, it's time to drop the bomb on this guy because otherwise he's going to be bulletproof. And so they are all urging President Biden to really go after Donald Trump now and try and beat him up. And to be fair, Donald Trump has demonstrated a remarkable degree of being bulletproof. So if you look at David Axelrod's eyes when he says this, or James Carville, they know that if they're not successful of redefining Trump in a different way than now, that Biden is going to lose the election. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So we're going to see if Biden can do this effectively. And Mike, I've just got to tell you, every time you think he is on the cusp of victory, Joe Biden finds a way to draw defeat from the jaws of victory.
Okay, Keith, tell me how Biden is going to be able to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
Well, Mike, I'm glad you asked. Just this week, the Biden administration came out and announced that they're going to move, just like California did, to an all-electric vehicle fleet by 2033. The headline in the editorial in today's Wall Street Journal was, Biden is coming for your truck. Now, here is the issue. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal let you post comments on their page. And I did one saying, look, this is not going to work. People don't want to buy electric cars. They don't want to be forced to buy electric cars. They don't want to rent electric cars. We don't have the charging infrastructure for them. Energy costs are high. They don't work in the cold. They have worse accidents because they're heavier. They catch fire. The fire departments can't put it out because they don't have the stuff for the battery. I got 111 recommends on the New York Times. They're equivalent to Facebook likes, which is the most ever for any story, because Americans don't want to be told what to drive. That's the one sacrosanct, sacred decision that every American redneck truck driver gets to make when he goes in to get his 150. They don't want electric trucks. I actually saw today on the street one of the new Tesla Cyber trucks, which looks like a spaceship, and some people are going to like that, but $400 to replace the tire, and a lot of people are not. So you've got these government mandates. And, I know people think, well, it's no big deal. It's just more environmental stuff. And people who drive electric cars sort of like them, except if you read the stories of people who run out of energy. But that's going to be for Republicans what abortion is for Democrats. It's the issue that gets them pissed and gets them out to the polls. So that's a place he did not need to go, but yet he's there.
Okay, so that's a deficit. You're not telling me how he's going to win.
The other thing that he's got to deal with is he's got to deal with a Democratic base that is on the wrong side of Israel in the Israel-Hamas war. So we've now figured out that when Joe Biden talks about a two-state solution, the states he's talking about are Michigan and Minnesota, or maybe Wisconsin. So He has now fully pulled the rug out from under Netanyahu, and that's going to cause a schism with the Jewish vote. So how is he going to win? He's got to quit making knucklehead moves to appeal to his base, like, let's decide we're going to ban gasoline cars and make everybody go electric. And let's figure out whose side we're on in Israel. And, let's lead. He's running ads right now. He's spending his money. He's got a big money advantage. He's spending it showing empty shelves during the COVID days and saying, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Now, there were empty shelves 4 years ago, but I don't think anybody's going to blame Donald Trump for that. That was a supply-demand issue based on shipping, and the whole world sort of stopped for about 3 or 4 months.
Right.
But that's where they're going. He's got to find a better line of attack on Donald Trump than what he's doing now. That's how he's going to win. Issues that actually matter to real people. And he's having a hard time finding that list.
You've given me nothing but deficits. So if you were advising the Biden campaign, how would you advise them?
First of all, call me old school about this in politics, but when your name appears in the same sentence with porn star, stripper, and hush money, it's not a good thing. So they've got to get, and highlight some of his legal issues. They've got to highlight his business fraud issues. They've got to make it look like, and it's not hard to do, that he doesn't share the values of voters and that he is a threat to democracy. And many Republicans have gone ahead and done that and made that case. And they've got to do it, and they have to find a way to make it effective. They have to find a way to make the Biden economic plan be relatable to people where they live, and he's doing a piss poor job at that.
Right.
So nonetheless, the economy is up, the stock market is up. He's just got to make that more tangible to people. He steps on his own lines because the stock market's up, and he turns around and wants to tax unrealized capital gains. And anybody that has any realizes how expensive that's going to be.
Right.
So if he jettisons some Bidenomics, he'd do well. And if you talk again to Carville and Axelrod and Rove, they'll tell you there's about 8 battleground states, and he's got to focus on those states. He's got to get his voters out and get them motivated. And a lot of smart people know how to do that, and he needs to make sure they're fully employed. The one thing the Biden campaign is doing is it's got a whole separate campaign war room set up to beat the hell out of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Cornel West and the other third-party candidates, because they look at that and they know that those third-party candidates are also going to take votes away that would otherwise Kennedy splits them sort of evenly. But what he does is he lowers the threshold for winning for Trump down to about 40%. Right. And Trump has a solid 40% that's not going anywhere. That's why the third parties are so damaging or threatening to Biden. And he is focused and does have a team and is going to spend a lot of money going after those guys.
So it takes money to do that. Let's talk about the money right now.
I tell you what, for a guy who's rich, he's pretty poor these days. So we've had new numbers that have just been released. The Trump campaign in February raised $20.3 million. The Biden campaign, $53 million. In terms of cash on hand, Trump had $42 million. Biden has $155 million.
Yikes.
Super PACs associated with Trump have $26 million. Biden super PACs, $64 million. The Republican National Committee has $11 million. The Democratic National Committee has $26 million. This is the worst deficit for Republicans since 2008 in terms of cash on hand going into a campaign like this. What's notable is that Nikki Haley, 3 weeks after she's pulled out of the race and quit raising money, has more money, $11.5 million, than the RNC itself.
Wow.
So that tells you that Republican donors have closed the checkbooks. They're not interested in paying for his legal fees. So most people are not going to want to do that. And small donors will respond to anything. But for the most part, they've closed their checkbooks too. Now, that's just the money that the candidates have raised. The Natural Resources Defense Council has pledged hundreds of millions of dollars. The union has pledged close to $1 billion. There will be close to $1 billion of outside dark money, if you will, or PAC money or independent expenditures spent on behalf of the Democrats in this campaign, substantially more than the Republicans. So the resources are there for Biden to run just a devastating air campaign on the Republicans. The issue is whether or not they've got the issues that speak to the voters to get there. I don't know where he's looking to find the issues that are going to turn people, but he needs to find them pretty fast.
Right. And as we talked about in our last episode, having the money doesn't assure you a win. But it sounds like it's pretty overwhelming, the difference in the purses. So if money did matter, he's in a good position.
He's very much in a good position. And hopefully, if he spends his money smartly and correctly, when he gets to the conventions, he will have a substantial lead. Now, if all this money gets spent and we get to the conventions and the polls look more or less like they do now, he's dead man walking.
Now, all of that money doesn't just go to him either. Some of it goes to the down ticket, right?
It will. And Democrats are going to have, I think, a better year in terms of raising money to defend their Senate incumbents and to defend their House seats. They sort of always do that. When the Republicans lost McCarthy, they lost the best fundraiser they ever had. And in fact, McCarthy is raising significant money to knock out about 6 of the 8 Freedom Caucus people who voted him out of office. They've got primary challenges. So payback is what they say it is.
Yeah.
But Johnson can't raise that kind of money. And the antics of the Republicans in Congress make it more difficult for them to raise that kind of money. They're all divided. They won't even go to the same retreat together. I think the Democrats are probably going to take the House, and the Republicans will likely take the Senate by a vote or two.
So it's interesting. And I did see some polling that showed that Trump was beating Biden in all of the battleground states. But then you looked at some of the Senate campaigns, and it was kind of the reverse. The Democrat was beating the Republican. And there's some other factors involved in that as well, right?
There are. Democrats got a break this week because the Republicans nominated Bernie Moreno in Ohio. The Democrats actually funded a significant campaign, so Bernie Moreno's too conservative for Ohio, to pump him up with Republicans. And he did win the nomination, and that will make it an easier race for Sherrod Brown to keep what will otherwise be a tough seat in Ohio, which is turning more and more red. Republicans will undoubtedly pick up West Virginia with Joe Manchin leaving. And there are some other races now that have become interesting. Larry Hogan, the Republican governor, former governor of Maryland, is now leading both of the Democratic candidates in Maryland. So if Republicans pick up deep blue Maryland, that would be a huge win. Bob Menendez, a senator from New Jersey, announced he's not going to run in the Democratic primary against the governor's wife and a Congressman Kim, but he did not close the door against running as an independent. If you've got a Democrat plus Menendez plus a Republican, that opens the door for a Republican to win in New Jersey. They did get the more crazy Republican out of the Montana race. That makes Tester a little bit more vulnerable. And Republicans maybe have an outside chance in Michigan and Nevada, although you certainly have to say the Democrats are favored there now. And in Arizona, Kristen Sinema pulled herself out of the race. It was going to be a Democrat, an independent, and a Republican. We'll see where her votes go. They'll probably go back to the Democrat, and that probably increases the chances that the Democrats will hold Arizona.
And then, of course, there's the factor of what's going on in Congress right now. As of this recording this morning, MTG, as we like to call her, put in a motion to vacate for the speaker. So what does this all mean?
The circus has come to town in Washington, D.C., and under the big top, we have Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, she filed the motion. She needs to basically ask for it to be voted on and discharged. So she, laid it across the table, but didn't said, don't bring it up yet.
Sort of hedged her bet, right?
It was what in Congress they call performative acting, to make the press conference and put it on the table, but without actually really doing anything.
Got it.
The same day, Congressman Mike Gallagher, who has previously announced he's not going to run again, has announced he's going to leave Congress on April the 19th. Ken Buck leaves Congress today. The Gallagher leaving means that there's not enough time for a special election. So his seat will remain open until the November election. It's a Republican by 15 seat. So a Republican will win it, but not until November. So that means the Republican majority in the House of Representatives is one vote.
Wow. So that could make a difference, especially if they vote to vacate.
Well, yes, if they vote to vacate, you're hard-pressed to see how Johnson will keep his seat. And the interesting thing is, in California, we have a special election and we'll have a runoff between two Republicans. Vince Fong, who was Kevin McCarthy's hand-selected candidate, is going to go to the House. And it'd be interesting to see how McCarthy's allocate decides he's going to vote in that situation. He won't be there, though, for a couple of months.
Right. Wow. I think we covered a lot of ground in this short period of time today. Is there anything else we need to cover?
Well, it's been an interesting week for Trump's money. So next week, he's supposed to come up with $400 million that he says he does not have. By the same token, he is apparently going to file he's merged. He got approval to merge with a special purpose corporation to take his company public. And he is supposed to get a $400 and some odd million payoff based on the value of his stock when that comes public, which could be as early as Monday. Now, he can't sell that stock for at least, I think it's 30 days because of lockup rules. Now, here's something he probably didn't think about, because I was a director of a public corporation, and they're proposing Don Jr. to be on the board of this new company. Directors of public corporations get investigated. You have to get fingerprinted and get investigated by the New York Attorney General.
Yikes.
Then you get regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And corporations that are publicly traded with stock are held to a fiduciary standard in terms of, are you protecting the shareholders? Were he to, for example, try and get special permission to sell his shares early before the lockout period has expired, maybe 60 days, actually, now that I think about it, there would be a lawyer at the courthouse steps before the sun goes down suing that company for violating the fiduciary responsibilities to protect the shareholders, because him selling shares will cause the shares to drop. So he is about to open himself up to an entirely new regulatory framework that takes things pretty seriously.
And would probably make him a lot more vulnerable than he already is, I would think.
Yeah, the false statements in a public filing or a public document related to a public company, and as we all know, he sort of plays fast and loose with those kind of documents. But if you're a publicly traded company and you have them there, get ready for class action land, because that's where you're going.
Right. Now, the one thing that people keep saying that he could do, but I don't think his ego would allow it, would be to file bankruptcy. Would that help him?
Financial professionals say it would. He's done bankruptcy 4 times based on his casinos in Atlantic City. But at this point in his career, it would be an admission that he is A, not as rich as he says he is, B, has no control over his own assets. And before, the casinos were sort of LLCs, separate and apart. Here, if he goes bankrupt, everything is so intertwined, he would end up losing quite a bit of assets.
Right.
So it would be humiliating for him, and he doesn't do humiliation well, although he does it often.
All right. Anything else, Keith?
No, it's a wild week. The Lord only knows what's happened since we've been on doing this, but stay tuned for next week.
That's true. We record this and stuff goes on while we're recording it, and we have to hold it till next week, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week. Tell your friends about the show, Red versus Blue. Subscribe to the podcast and tell them that this is the one place that they can take 15, 20 minutes, however long we go on, and get the whole picture for the past week. And that's a good way to do it. And then the rest of the time you can spend enjoying your family and your friends and drinking heavily or whatever you do. And this is the place to be. So thanks for joining us on this edition of Red versus Blue. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.